Hey guys, for those of you who don't know, we are holding a contest right now where you guys are going to come up with the name of our next plugin release. And I wanted to give you just a little background on what this plugin does and give you a little demo so you can see it in action as to help generate some ideas for you. In this example, we're going to use it on drums to bring out the punch and the oomph and the power and whatever other buzzword you want to use for it. So let's dive in and just do it. So let's get started. I have this drum loop here. Let me get rid of this for a minute. So I have this drum loop. Okay. So anyway, it sounds fine, but when I listen to it, like the kick drum just doesn't really kick me hard enough, and the snare doesn't really cut through as much as I'd like it to. So we're going to use compression to help that. Now, what we want is, when I hear that kick, let's listen to it again. I want some more deep kick, and I want some more click out of it. So the first thing we might be tempted to do is kind of reach for an EQ. So let's do that. So here I have an EQ that boosts the low end and it boosts the high end. The low end for the oomph and the high end for the click. You can hear it does bring out some of that low end in the kick, and it does bring out some of the attack. But it does it in a way that adds too much mud and harshness. So that's not what we want. What we want to do is use parallel compression to really bring out the initial attack. And so I'm going to walk you through how it's done. First off, what parallel compression means is that you blend the wet and the dry. And so we set this up in a way that lets you easily do that. So let's turn the dry on, and let's turn the wet down. Because you're hearing the dry sound. And this is what happens when you blend in the wet. You'll notice that it's adding sort of a room sound to it, but it's not adding any attack and it's not adding any low end. And that's where other compressors kind of leave it when it comes to parallel compression. But that's why we designed this plugin, to give you more control, to let you get in there and really take advantage of what parallel compression can do. So this is an equalizer that equalizes only the wet signal. It doesn't apply EQ to the dry, unless you tell it to, of course. But we're going to keep it on the wet. And we're going to hear what happens when we turn this on. Okay, so we've got flat. Let's mute the dry and listen to the wet. Okay, nothing too special. Let's start just boosting this like crazy. Okay, so that gives us an effect similar to when we boosted the EQ high and low. That's not exactly what we're looking for, but it's at least in the right direction. Now, this is where things really start to get fun. Each compression type has a different way of reacting to the incoming signal, and they excel at different things. For this example, the one that actually works really well is called digital. And the way it works is it really lets the transient through, but then clamps down hard. Now, in a normal compression situation, this would not sound great. Here's what it sounds like. Now, as we adjust this attack time, you notice there's kind of a sweet spot there, where it's kicking hard, but then it's clamping down right after that. And that's what we want. When we want to add low end to the kick, we want it to hit hard, and then we want it to go away. We don't want it to sustain, otherwise it muddies up the mix, and it just gets in the way. And so that's what this compressor is allowing us to do. It really hits that low end hard, but then it turns it down right away. And when we blend this in with the dry, Remember, this is what it sounded like before. This is what happens when we blend in this new. Okay, so we're getting close. Now, one of the cool things about parallel compression is that we get to throw away all the rules that we've learned about when it comes to compression, when it comes to EQ. So first thing I'm going to do, and this is something that I love on kick drums, is I'm going to boost this resonance way up there. Maybe bring the gain down. And this is an EQ curve that you would never put on anything that you really were mixing. But when it comes to parallel compression, it actually really, this resonance gives it this massive oomph. And when we blend this with the dry, anyway, so let's hear that in context. This is on, off. Off, on. So you can already hear that kick is really starting to come through. It gives it that oomph and that attack that you want from drums. Okay, so let's move on to the snare. Now, with the snare, we're looking for something a little bit different. What I want is the snare to cut through. So let's pull this up. Soloing the snare. Okay, so what I want to add to the attack of the snare, but I don't want it to be harsh. So we're going to take a similar approach that we did with the kick drum and turn this on. So we're going to use this, and again, we're going to blend this with our dry signal. When I'm doing parallel compression, I just like to crank the ratio, make it extreme. So here's our dry. Here we're adding some attack. Now it's not quite right. It's a bit much for me. So what I want to do is go back to our tone control, because this is really where the magic happens in parallel compression, is being able to adjust the EQ to your wet signal. So let's hear the wet. I want the attack to be, let's flatten this out first. I want the attack to really focus on sort of the low end body of the snare. So I want to pull down some of this high end. Maybe some of that low end as well. So now you hear that attack, the initial attack is really being focused in the body area of the snare. And when we blend this in with the original, now our wet signal becomes sort of our attack and body. So I think I like it right there. So let's hear these both in context now. Now that snare sounds a little extreme. Let me pull it down. So let's bypass it. Bypass snare, snare on. off, on. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way that snare sounds. Now let's go up to our bus, because I'd still like a little bit more power out of this thing. So again, I kind of want to bring out some more of the oomph in the attack. So I set up, in a similar way that we did the kick drum. But this is being applied to the bus, the entire drum bus instead. Off. On. Now if we go and listen to this is what we're adding to our signal, right? Some low-end oomph and some high-end attack. And we can adjust this. All right, and so I wanted to add just one more compressor in here to kind of give it a cohesive feel. And again, I'm using this in parallel. I feel like now that I have the option, I just use everything in parallel. So let's turn this off, the dry. And this is what we're going to be blending into our signal. Really scooping the mids. Again, this is not something you'd ever do on your own, but when you blend it in, with it, without it. Now if that's too much low end, all right, so let's go back and listen to where we started and where we ended up. Let's bypass our bus, our kick, and our snare effects. This is where we started. And this is with everything on. And the nice thing about doing this in parallel like this is that if any effect is too much, you just go and pull down the wet signal. Before, after. Hey, so hopefully that gives you a good idea of how you can use parallel compression to really bring out the punch in drums, to bring out the power. And we have some more videos coming up to give you more ideas of how you can use this plugin. So keep an eye out. Thanks for watching.